Chapter 4 of the Further Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. The Further Adventures of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Chapter 4 Renewed Invasion of Savages. And now they had another broil with the three Englishmen, one of whom, a most turbulent fellow, being in a rage at one of the three captive slaves, because the fellow had not done something right which he bade him to do, and seemed a little untractable in his showing him, drew a hatchet out of a frog belt which he wore by his side, and fell upon the poor savage, not to correct him, but to kill him. One of the Spaniards who was by, seeing him give the fellow a barbarous cut with the hatchet, which he aimed at his head, but stuck into his shoulder, so that he thought he had cut the poor creature's arm off, ran to him, and entreating him not to murder the poor man, placed himself between him and the savage, to prevent the mischief. The fellow, being enraged the more at this, struck at the Spaniard with his hatchet, and swore he would serve him as he intended to serve the savage; which the Spaniard perceiving, avoided the blow, and with a shovel, which he had in his hand, for they were all working in the field about their corn land, knocked the brute down. Another of the Englishmen, running up at the same time to help his comrade, knocked the Spaniard down. And then two Spaniards more came in to help their man, and a third Englishman fell upon them. They had none of them any firearms or any other weapons but hatchets and other tools, except this third Englishman; he had one of my rusty cutlasses, with which he made at the last two Spaniards, and wounded them both. This fray set the whole family in an uproar, and more help coming in, they took the three Englishmen prisoners. The next question was, what should be done with them? They had been so often mutinous, and were so very furious, so desperate, and so idle withal, they knew not what course to take with them; for they were mischievous to the highest degree, and cared not what hurt they did to any man; so that, in short, it was not safe to live with them. The Spaniard who was governor told them, in so many words, that if they had been of his own country he would have hanged them; for all laws and all governors were to preserve society, and those who were dangerous to the society ought to be expelled out of it. But as they were Englishmen, and that it was to the generous kindness of an Englishman that they all owed their preservation and deliverance, he would use them with all possible lenity, and would leave them to the judgment of the other two Englishmen, who were their countrymen. One of the two honest Englishmen stood up, and said they desired it might not be left to them. "For," says he, "I am sure we ought to sentence them to the gallows." And with that he gives an account how Will Atkins, one of the three, had proposed to have all the five Englishmen join together and murder all the Spaniards while they were in their sleep. When the Spanish governor heard this, he calls to Will Atkins, "How, Seignior Atkins, would you murder us all? What have you to say to that?" The hardened villain was so far from denying it, that he said it was true, and swore they would do it still before they had done with them. "Well, but Seignior Atkins," says the Spaniard, "what have we done to you that you will kill us? What would you get by killing us? And what must we do to prevent you killing us? Must we kill you, or you kill us? Why will you put us to the necessity of this, Seignior Atkins?" says the Spaniard very calmly, and smiling. Seignior Atkins was in such a rage at the Spaniard's making a jest of it, that, had he not been held by three men, and withal had no weapon near him, it was thought he would have attempted to kill the Spaniard in the middle of all the company. This harebrained carriage obliged them to consider seriously what was to be done. The two Englishmen and the Spaniard who saved the poor savage were of the opinion that they should hang one of the three for an example to the rest, and that particularly it should be he that had twice attempted to commit murder with his hatchet. Indeed, there was some reason to believe he had done it, for the poor savage was in such a miserable condition with the wound he had received that it was thought he could not live. But the governor's Spaniard still said no, it was an Englishman that had saved all their lives, and he would never consent to put an Englishman to death, though he had murdered half of them. Nay, he said if he had been killed himself by an Englishman, and had time left to speak, it should be that they should pardon him. This was so positively insisted on by the governor's Spaniard, that there was no gainsaying it; and as merciful counsels are most apt to prevail where they are so earnestly pressed, so they all came into it. But then it was to be considered what should be done to keep them from doing the mischief they designed; for all agreed, governor and all, that means were to be used for preserving the society from danger. After a long debate, it was agreed that they should be disarmed, and not permitted to have either gun, powder, shot, sword, or any weapon; that they should be turned out of the society, and left to live where they would and how they would by themselves; but that none of the rest, either Spaniards or English, should hold any kind of converse with them, or have anything to do with them; that they should be forbid to come within a certain distance of the place where the rest dwelt; and if they offered to commit any disorder, so as to spoil, burn, kill, or destroy any of the corn, plantings, buildings, fences, or cattle belonging to the society, they should die without mercy, and they would shoot them wherever they could find them. The humane governor, musing upon the sentence, considered a little upon it, and turning to the two honest Englishmen, said, "Hold, you must reflect that it will be long ere they can raise corn and cattle of their own, and they must not starve; we must therefore allow them provisions." So he caused to be added, that they should have a proportion of corn given to them to last them 8 months; and for seed to sow, by which time they might be supposed to raise some of their own; that they should have 6 milch goats, 4 he goats, and 6 kids given them, as well for present subsistence as for a store; and that they should have tools given them for their work in the fields; but they should have none of these tools or provisions unless they would swear solemnly that they would not hurt or injure any of the Spaniards with them, or of their fellow Englishmen. Thus they dismissed them the society, and turned them out to shift for themselves. They went away sullen and refractory, as neither content to go away nor to stay; but, as there was no remedy, they went, pretending to go and choose a place where they would settle themselves, and some provisions were given them, but no weapons. About 4 or 5 days after, they came again for some victuals, and gave the governor an account where they had pitched their tents, and marked themselves out a habitation and a plantation; and it was a very convenient place indeed, on the remotest part of the island, northeast, much about the place where I providentially landed in my first voyage, when I was driven out to sea in my foolish attempt to sail round the island. Here they built themselves 2 handsome huts, and contrived them in a manner like my first habitation, being close under the side of a hill, having some trees already growing on 3 sides of it, so that by planting others it would be very easily covered from the sight, unless narrowly searched for. They desired some dried goat skins for beds and covering, which were given them, and upon giving their words that they would not disturb the rest, or injure any of the plantations, they gave them hatchets, and what other tools they could spare, some peas, barley, and rice, for sowing, and, in a word, anything they wanted, except arms and ammunition. They lived in this separate condition about 6 months, and had got in their first harvest, though the quantity was but small, the parcel of land they had planted being but little. Indeed, having all their plantation to form, they had a great deal of work upon their hands, and when they came to make boards and pots and such things, they were quite out of their element, and could make nothing of it; therefore when the rainy season came on, for want of a cave in the earth, they could not keep their grain dry, and it was in great danger of spoiling. This humbled them much, so they came and begged the Spaniards to help them, which they very readily did, and in 4 days worked a great hole in the side of the hill for them, big enough to secure their corn and other things from the rain; but it was a poor place at best compared to mine, and especially as mine was then, for the Spaniards had greatly enlarged it, and made several new apartments in it. About 3/4 of a year after this separation, a new frolic took these rogues, which, together with the former villainy they had committed, brought mischief enough upon them, and had very near been the ruin of the whole colony. The 3 new associates began, it seems, to be weary of the laborious life they led, and that without hope of bettering their circumstances; and a whim took them that they would make a voyage to the continent, from whence the savages came, and would try if they could seize upon some prisoners among the natives there, and bring them home, so as to make them do the laborious part of the work for them. The project was not so preposterous, if they had gone no further; but they did nothing, and proposed nothing, but had either mischief in the design, or mischief in the event; and if I may give my opinion,